Now that we've covered Title IX and BFIT's consent policy, let's talk about what to do if you're not directly involved in a concerning or risky situation, but you witness one happening. As I hope you've begun to see already, one of BFIT's strongest values is community. As part of this community, one of your responsibilities is to help keep BFIT safe and welcoming for all. This may mean intervening safely in a potentially risky situation or asking someone else to help you. This final section of the training will help you figure out what to do in these situations and provide strategies for intervention. Before we discuss intervention skills, it's important for you to understand what it means to be a bystander. A bystander is someone who witnesses an incident occur, but who isn't taking part in what is happening. This is when you'd use the intervention skills we're about to go over. In the cartoon on the right, you can see a few reasons why someone might not want to get involved, though. As we know, it can be difficult to intervene and help someone. This can be particularly true when there's a lot of other people around due to the bystander effect. This concept means that the greater the number of people present in a situation, the less likely people are to help a person in distress. To better explain the impact of the bystander effect, let's take a look at the 1964 murder that brought this psychological phenomenon into the spotlight. Before I begin, I want to note that the following story contains details that some might find uncomfortable or disturbing. Please feel free to skip ahead in the presentation by a little less than 2 minutes if you would like to skip this story. On March 13, 1964, 28-year-old Kitty Genovese headed home from work around 2:30 in the morning. As she approached her apartment building, a man grabbed her and proceeded to attack her with a knife. Kitty screamed. One man then yelled out of his window to say, "Let that girl alone," causing the attacker to flee. But no one else intervened or helped Kitty. Kitty then crawled to the rear of her apartment building and stayed there until her murderer returned 10 minutes later to continue attacking her and steal her money. Eventually, Kitty was found by one of her neighbors who screamed for someone to call the police. The police arrived several minutes later, but it was too late for Kitty. The New York Times went on to publish an article that claimed 38 people had witnessed the murder, none of whom called the police. This murder sparked psychologists to begin studying the bystander effect and helped lead to the creation of 911. Almost 50 years later, it has come to light that there are many inconsistencies between the reported facts of the case and the story that is now legend. Despite this, bystander effect is still, unfortunately, a very real part of our life. One doesn't have to search very hard to find news stories of teenagers filming fights while someone is badly beaten, and many other tragedies that could have been prevented if someone had intervened. As the cartoon illustrated earlier, there are many reasons folks have for not intervening in these situations. Sometimes people aren't paying attention or don't identify the situation as risky because of how others are reacting to it. If you see something out of the ordinary, it's always better to think twice before dismissing it. That's step 1 and 2. Notice the event and identify it as a risky situation. The next step to being an active bystander is to take responsibility. Now that you know the role the bystander effect plays in groups, you also know that there's a good chance that if you don't do something, no one else will either. How we respond impacts everyone else in the situation. The next 2 steps involving deciding how to help and intervening safely. Let's take a closer look at step number 4 on the to-do list, deciding how to help. A great way to assess this is using the 3 Ds. The 3 Ds stand for direct, delegate, and distract. The first approach is direct. This means you are the person intervening in the situation. If you choose to intervene directly, you could ask if someone is okay or speak up when you hear something offensive. You can also delegate by asking someone else to intervene in the situation. In some cases, this is necessary and the safest way to help in a concerning event. At BFIT, you can report the issue to security, a professor, me, the director of student wellness, or someone else you trust who works for the college. If you're not on campus or the situation requires immediate attention, call 911 for help. Another approach is to create a distraction. One way to use this approach is to involve yourself in a conversation to provide someone an opportunity to excuse themselves. You can also use humor to ease the tension in a situation, but be smart about when you use it so you don't undermine your message. To illustrate each of these options, please watch this video called Step Up by American University.
We never think that terrible things will happen to us.
Transporting one to Sibley Hospital for alcohol poisoning.
Or to the people we know. The truth is, many students face issues, including alcohol abuse, dating violence, hazing, sexual assault, and mental health emergencies.
I'm a 19-year-old male. I have no fault.
Many times we have the opportunity to prevent it, but we just don't notice until it's too late. But what if you could step up to make a difference?
Will you step up? First, notice that something is happening. Know what's going on around you.
Second, recognize that something is wrong. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't.
Third, take personal responsibility. If not you, then who?
Fourth, know how you can help. There are lots of ways that you can intervene.
Finally, step up to help using one of the 3 Ds. Direct, delegate, or distract. You could be the difference.
All night, baby.
Who's next? Who's next? Come on! Come on!
You can be direct if something doesn't seem right. Hey, I think you've had enough. Let's take a break and get you some water.
You saw me standing right there. You acted like I didn't even exist. You're making me.
You don't
have
have any
freaking
respect. Hey, man! I don't think you should be yelling at her like that. Maybe you should take a walk. Are you alright?
Hey, Jonathan, are you coming out tonight?
No, I don't feel like doing anything. Or seeing anyone.
Oh, okay. I hope you feel better. I'll see you later. If you don't feel comfortable, or you don't know what to do, you can delegate. Ask someone else to get involved. Hey, can I talk to you? I'm really worried about Jonathan.
You want to get out of here? My dorm room's nearby.
It's as easy as causing a distraction. My roommate's really drunk. Could you distract him while I get her out of here?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, buddy, aren't you in my econ class?
Your econ class?
Yeah.
Hey, you look tired. You want to go back to the room? You can be the difference. Be more than just a bystander. It's what we do here at American University.
Keep in mind your safety and the well-being of others when assessing a situation and deciding what actions to take. You have options. If you don't feel safe directly intervening, you can cause a distraction, or you can delegate and get someone else involved.
Now that you've seen each of the 3Ds illustrated, let's take a look at 3 different scenarios. I will read each scenario and give you the opportunity to answer before I explain what I would do in each situation. There are many ways to respond to these incidences, so no, answers different than mine could also be correct. The first scenario says, you're hanging out between classes with a group of students. The conversation topics have consisted of classwork, weekend plans, and the start of the NFL season. At one point, you hear one of your friends tell a joke that you find to be homophobic and sexist. You look across the table and notice someone else looking uncomfortable, while some people laugh. Which of the 3Ds would you use in this situation? Direct, delegate, or distract? Answer the question now. In this situation, I would choose to be direct, either by saying something to the group like, "That's not funny," or by discreetly asking the person who looked uncomfortable to go do something else with me, like grabbing lunch or helping me with homework. I wouldn't choose to delegate to security or 911 in this situation because I don't see the situation as dangerous or an emergency. But if this was an ongoing issue with the person who made the joke, I may ask a professor, my success coach, the dean of students, or the director of student wellness and support to talk with him about the language he is using. I also wouldn't choose to distract in this situation because it allows the hateful statement to go unaddressed, which could be seen as condoning the behavior. Let's take a look at scenario 2. You notice your friend has been drinking until he is passing out drunk multiple times a week. He is starting to miss a lot of classes and is complaining about his grades going downhill. You're concerned about him, but you don't know how you can help. What could you or someone else do in this situation? Perhaps if I had noticed my friend's alcohol consumption had increased, but it wasn't to the point of passing out multiple nights a week, I may choose to be direct with him first in hopes his drinking wouldn't escalate to this point. However, based on the info in scenario 2, my top choice would be to delegate this to someone I trust. When someone is having issues with substances to the extent this friend is, it's a pretty serious issue, and I would want a professional to help my friend. This is a perfect situation to bring in the director of student wellness. Of course, you can also tell someone else on campus and they can involve me as well. I'll then be able to connect the student to the appropriate community resources. Finally, distract may not be the best option in this situation. However, some students have suggested doing activities that don't include alcohol with a friend to keep him occupied. Alright, the last scenario says, you're heading into your class and a female student passes you looking nervous. You look down the hall and you see a male student following her and yelling, "You weren't walking away from me last week." He then goes on to call her some pretty offensive names. Which of the 3Ds would you use in this situation? Direct, delegate, or distract? For scenario 3, I could see any of the 3Ds possibly working. It just depends on the situation and your comfort level. You could be direct with the guy yelling and say something like, "Hey, it's not cool of you to talk to her like that. It seems like she wants to be left alone right now." Like you saw in the Step Up video, you could also cause a distraction to give the female student a chance to get further away from the guy yelling at her. This is as simple as saying, "Hey man, I think your car is being towed," or asking directions to something on campus. And if you weren't comfortable stepping in, or you're really worried about the safety of the female student, it would be totally appropriate to delegate this to someone else on campus, like security. Now that you're familiar with the 3Ds, let's talk about 4 more intervention skills you may find helpful when directly intervening. Let's first talk about I statements. To use this, start by stating your feelings, then name the behavior, and how you want the person to respond. This is good practice in every form of conversation, especially relationships. Using I statements takes the focus off the person you're talking to, even if what you're saying is about something they're doing. Saying, "I feel uncomfortable when you say sexist jokes. Could you please stop talking about women that way?" feels better to hear than "You always make sexist jokes. Are you ever going to grow up?" When communicating this way, the listener is more likely to do what you ask because they don't feel the need to defend themselves. If you don't feel comfortable speaking to someone directly but would like to intervene, a silent stare or non-aggressive negative body language can help you communicate. Sometimes just knowing someone is watching is enough to stop a situation. This may not always be effective though, so make sure you use it mindfully. Another intervention technique that you might find helpful is called bring it home. For instance, you might say, "I hope no one ever says that kind of thing about your girlfriend," after hearing someone call a woman a derogatory term. Using this kind of statement causes the individual to think about the impact their words or actions have on their target. The final intervention skill I'll share with you today is known as "we're friends, right?" Like many of the techniques we've spoken about, this intervention changes your message from critical to caring. Say you see that your friend made a sexually explicit comment on a random woman's Instagram post. You could say to your friend, "You're a creep, who does that?" But it likely won't be all that effective in getting your friend to change their behavior. They may be more likely to listen if you phrase your response, "As your friend, I've got to tell you that comment sounded pretty creepy. The women I know don't like that. I'd delete it and stop doing that if I were you." This type of intervention also helps the individual reconsider what they've said or done. These are just a few examples of direct intervention skills, and many more can be found online if you need some other ideas to help you feel comfortable intervening. Now that we reviewed Title IX consent and intervention skills, it is my hope that you feel better equipped to keep BFIT's community safe and welcoming for all. And hopefully you see that while you don't have to do everything, it's important that you do something. And with that, the training is complete. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact Emma Michalowski, the Director of Student Wellness and Support, Jackie Cornog, Dean of Students and Title IX Coordinator, or Brett Wellman, Assistant Dean of Student Life and Deputy Title IX Coordinator.